Hello, my name is Michael Fryer. I'm a management development specialist and executive coach, and for the last 20 years or so I've been helping managers and leaders around the globe be better at what they do. And this short talk, is aimed at anyone who manages people. Now, whatever organisation you work in, COVID-19 will have changed the context for that organisation. It'll be busier, quieter, tougher. There will be more uncertainty and more anxiety. I just want to take a few minutes to share a few simple ideas for you managers to help keep your team going. And these are simple ideas, they're also not new ideas. And that's really one of the points I want to make. There can be something about situations like COVID-19 that can make us forget what we already know. So this is really about connecting or reconnecting with the abilities, skills and experience and knowledge we already have. So if you can detach and stand back from this situation, it's apparent that the principles that underpin good leadership and management remain the same as always. Nothing has really changed due to this situation. I think that this is perhaps in a strange way an encouraging thought, because there are always challenges and difficulties to deal with as a manager or a leader. There are always unexpected external events to respond to. Just recently, dare I mention it, things like Brexit, or even the wrong sort of weather, or a new government with new policies, or indeed the impact of new technology. It's an endless list. Management is often about solving problems. Leadership and management has always been really about setting direction and then steering a course through the inevitable weather that follows, whether that weather be good, bad, or indifferent. So I'm going to assume by now that your organisation has already decided on and communicated any new strategy that it feels is required to help it survive, cope, or perhaps even thrive during the COVID-19 situation. By the way, if they haven't been asked by your organisation already, or indeed by yourself, here are a few just important questions I would suggest that are posed. How can we make the very best of this situation? Now, this is intended to be not a trite question, but an empowering question, because often in dark times we tend to focus on the problems and the difficulties in the situation. And actually the truth is there are opportunities in all situations. So how could you make the best of those? What's most important for us to focus on now? That's the second question. And that's about keeping your eye on the priorities, those things that are going to be most helpful, that are most pressing to do right now. Thirdly, if we step forward 6 weeks from now, what will we wished we had done? And that's really to put yourself into a sort of future frame and to help inform your decisions and your actions of today based on the outcomes that those will create for the future. So back to you and your team, and a simple reminder of those perennial things which make a good manager in troubled times or not. Number one is to help your team and each individual in it understand and connect to their role's purpose. It's an oft used word, cliched word perhaps, this word purpose, but it is vital to help people navigate and have a sense of connection to the organisation that they're in. And that connection for those individuals is about their contribution to support the organisation's strategy. That's whether that's a new COVID-related strategy or indeed the existing business strategy. Along with that, the second point is to agree some clear goals or outcomes for those individuals in your team and your team overall. If you need some support on that, perhaps Google SMART goals or well-formed outcomes, which will help you write and agree good, robust goals and outcomes with your team. And then they're more likely to be achieved. You're more likely to achieve success if you set goals in this way. Number three, decide on a process for regularly stepping back and reviewing progress on the goals and the outcomes. It's very tempting in times like these, to get stuck in and just keep doing and doing and doing, rather than stopping and reflecting on, well, where are we? What are we achieving? Are we doing the right things? Is this still the right direction that we need to be moving in? So it's about being mindful, I guess, again, to use another fashionable word, about the work that you're doing and encouraging your team to do. And set a fixed routine for this reviewing process. It needs to be a discipline, really, and it's better to review more regularly and in less depth than it is to leave it for too long, because clearly if a change in direction or a change in approach needs to happen, it's better to know that sooner rather than later. Point 4, I think, as part of that review process, also remember to ask, what are we learning that's useful? What value are we getting out of this situation? Second question, what's most important for us to do next? What are the next steps? Number 5, it's important as well to regularly acknowledge and recognise people's success and effort, and to make them feel that their contribution is valued and they're doing the right things, and that the organisation and you as their manager would appreciate more of that. Remember as well to share best practice across the team, so where something is working well or an approach is working well, to make sure that's disseminated amongst the team, and perhaps share it beyond too to the wider organisation where that can be helpful. I think as a general rule of thumb, it's a good idea in these more challenging situations to keep in more regular touch with everyone, but specifically to agree with the individuals in your team on the support and levels of contact that they will want from you generally. I think it's also a good idea just to be accessible to them and explain to your team how they can reach you if they need to. So rather than sort of hunkering down and disappearing, it's to make yourself more available and more accessible. So that's about the team. I think there's an important role that you've got to play as a manager, which is about encouraging individuals and coaching and mentoring them. So the individuals in your team now, not the team as a whole. The first thing I'd like to say is that the truth is it's impossible for us to feel anxious about something without first having had anxious thoughts. It's impossible to feel stressed without first having had stressful thoughts. So our emotional reaction is predominantly controlled by our thoughts. We often think that our experience of a situation is due to the impact of that external situation on us. And clearly, external events do have an impact, but actually our experience of a situation is much more about what we tell ourselves it is or allow it to be. And that's true for life in general and very true for this situation. What people are telling themselves about the situation will fundamentally affect their resourcefulness and their resilience and their emotional stance and posture to this situation. So it's something I would encourage you to do as managers, is to help people pay attention to their thoughts. And that's about helping people or supporting people to stop and detach. Again, it's this idea of review, stopping and reviewing. And in that, through that detachment, is to connect with the truth and reality of their situation, to help them see it for what it really is, rather than perhaps what they're telling themselves it is. Because in dark times, we can tell ourselves that our situation is dark. And then to help them develop some practical choices over how they might deal with the situation. And this is all about helping people respond rather than react. So helping them to feel more powerful in a situation, having choices and making decisions rather than feeling that they're driven by their situation. So coach people to pay attention to the objectivity, truth and helpfulness of their thinking, and to maintain healthy and positive thoughts. As the man once said, take control of your thoughts before they take control of you, and they certainly will. Help people focus on and exist predominantly in their circle of influence and much less in their circle of concern. Now, some of you may know this model. If I just draw this for you very briefly, it's a very simple idea. It looks like this. So there we are, circle of concern, circle of influence. In our circle of concern, particularly in times like these, are things like, when will the lockdown end? How many more people will die? What will happen to my job? What will happen to the economy of the country? They are things that we have no control over, and yet naturally they do concern us. And actually what they tend to do, if we spend time in that circle of concern, those thoughts tend to sap our attention, they take our time, they take our energy, and they encourage less useful ways of thinking. So what this model says is that we should focus more on the circle of influence. And that's really where we can affect what's going on in our lives and in our work lives. And perhaps those things that are just outside of our circle of influence, very close in, because if we chose to, we might have some influence over those things. So for example, the outcomes that we are controlling at work, the work of our team, how successful we're being. So what happens is if we focus or spend time predominantly in the circle of concern, our circle of influence actually shrinks. What we need to do is put our time and attention, stick to our knitting if you like, stick to those things that we can control and influence, and actually that will help our circle of influence grow and help us have much more control over our situations. I think the final thing is to encourage people in your team to take learning and value from their situation. I think it's true to say that in adverse times we can actually grow and develop more rapidly than in more settled or calmer times, simply because learning tends to happen at the edge or outside of our comfort zone. That's where our development and our growth exists. I think also I would suggest that people stop each lunchtime and ask themselves, am I having a good day? And if the answer is no, to do something about it for the remaining half of their day, to change that answer to yes, or at least to better. If you leave it a day, that means an opportunity is lost, that day is lost. So the principle here is review little and often, and then that gives you the opportunity to change the situation if you don't like what you find. Finally, and most importantly as a manager, is to ask each person in your team, how are you doing? And then pay attention to what they say and use that most valuable of management skills, your listening. So I hope you found that useful. Again, it's really a reprise or a reminder for most of you, I'm sure, but these things can get forgotten, in the hurly-burly of the situation that we're facing now. So be well, very best of luck, and speak again soon. Bye for now.